When I was at school, I didn't want to be an insolvency practitioner. What I wanted was a pair of suede cowboy boots, and my mum said no. I'm actually not very good with numbers, despite the fact I'm an accountant. You feel a little bit like you've got some type of disease. And at the end, he said, oh my goodness, you must not brush your teeth in the morning, you must sharpen them, because I basically put him in his box. To be fair, I was expecting my son at the time, so I was probably an irrational, hormonal woman. Sorry, pregnant ladies, you actually are fabulous. The vast majority of people that we see, they didn't get up that morning thinking, I know what I'm going to do today. I'm going to make myself bankrupt. I'm in a very, very small group of female IPs that have set up their own firm and gone through with it. And they were all like, abort, abort. If you're ever going to get a more honest bit of feedback, it's eavesdropping onto somebody else's conversation about you. It's like death and taxes, unfortunately. It could happen. Well, death definitely happens to everybody. There was a company that I was involved in that ran naked cruises from a ship. I didn't partake because that is just horrific. And I was like, there's not a thing in the world I haven't seen. How wrong could I have been? This is where it might get a little bit, that's what she said. Or if I did go, I would go and I would have one glass of wine. And anyone that knows me knows that that is weird. I was like the Tasmanian devil. I would absolutely love to retire and be a Disney princess. Everyone ponders what they, why am I here?
If you have been enjoying listening to the stories of entrepreneurs across Edinburgh, then why not subscribe? If you're on YouTube, you can hit the red button down below and hit the bell to get notifications. Or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, then subscribe to the podcast. We hope you enjoy the show. Claire, welcome. We are super excited to have you here. To start, why don't you just tell people a little bit about you and the business?
Oh, thanks very much for having me. I'm super honoured to be invited along. My name is Claire Middlebrook, and I have been running Middlebrooks Business Recovery Advice since about the beginning of 2015. The business is a boutique insolvency and restructuring firm, which sounds very grand, but what we try and do is give people and companies who are in financial distress a route to a more positive future. And that involves a number of different legislative processes that I have in my handbag at any one particular point in time. And as part of my team, I am a licensed insolvency practitioner, and I have two other licensed insolvency practitioners that work alongside me. And involved with the business at the moment are about 15 people. We use some subcontractors as well, which is a relatively new thing. And one of the sayings at Middlebrooks is every day is a school day. We like learning things at Middlebrooks. So every day we are looking at legislation, every day we're learning things, and every day we're helping people onto a better financial future.
Amazing. It's such an interesting industry because I don't think there's many people at school when they're, working out to go to uni being like, oh, I want to get into insolvency. So tell us, how did you end up there?
Well, when I was at school, I didn't want to be an insolvency practitioner. What I wanted was a pair of suede cowboy boots, and my mum said no. And my mother might feature loads on this because she's always got something to say about what I'm doing. But when I finished university and I did a degree in marketing and languages, and I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a chartered accountant as well, because then I'm going to be a really good employee because I'm going to have marketing and sales skills and I'm going to know the numbers as well. So I fell into becoming a chartered accountant, and at that point in time you could specialise in some bigger firms. I personally didn't like the idea of auditing because I'm actually not very good with numbers, despite the fact I'm an accountant, something that my family finds amusing. And I came across insolvency and restructuring, and it's a kind of hybrid between a solicitor and accountant, I would say. And what you've got to do is you're listening to people and you're listening to their stories. And what I find absolutely incredible about my role, it sounds terrible when you talk to someone about debt and about their finances not going well. It can become quite a negative conversation, but in my experience, it actually is a springboard for a lot of positive things, because we work and live in an economy that is a capitalist economy. And as part of that, sometimes businesses do need to be restructured and they do need to change. And that's what me and my team do. And we listen to the stories, a little bit like yourselves listening to Edinburgh Business Stories. And we plot a course for someone to get out of the problems that they're in from a financial perspective. And it's not, although I'm a chartered accountant, I don't prepare accounts. I probably just take them to bits more than actually putting them together. But you get such a variety of different people that you meet along the way. And it's also an industry and a career that has got very low barriers to entry. So you don't need to have a university degree to work within an insolvency practice. You don't have to have gone and done your chartered accountancy, for example. I just that was the route that I happened to take. So it's a great, if you're interested in people and you're interested in helping people, it's actually quite a good job to have.
It's so interesting. I just think the industry's such a weird one because you don't ever want to hang out. You know, like you don't ever want to be talking to you guys because of the nature of what you guys deal with. I think for me, I was a little bit, maybe I'm just naive, but I didn't really understand what you do. Can you just kind of give a little bit more in-depth understanding of like the process that people would kind of go through with you most of the time?
No, you're absolutely right. Nobody does want to speak to me. And early on in my career, if I'm allowed to digress slightly, I used to go to networking meetings. We've all heard of BNI and speed networking, where you would sit down and, date people. And actually people in that scenario, as soon as other attendees found out what I did, they would skip me. I literally was left on my own, like a little wallflower in the corner. And I would go to networking meetings and people would say, "Oh, hi, Claire, but I'm not going to speak to you because somebody might think that I've got problems if I'm speaking to you." So even at networking meetings, people would avoid me. So you feel a little bit like you've got some type of disease because you're an insolvency practitioner. But in terms of the process of what we do, we get people sent to us. Sometimes they're kicking and screaming. Other times they come to us because they've been so stressed for such a long time that they need to talk to someone that's knowledgeable. And we get sent people from accountants, from solicitors, basically anybody. And the first thing we do is we talk and we listen to what their history is. Now, it would be wrong of me to say that it's all unicorns and sparkles when we have these conversations. We have to deliver bad news sometimes. And we sometimes have to give people a future that is going to look a little bit bleak for a while. But what always happens is after those meetings is the person will come in like that and they will leave with their head a little bit higher because they've got a little bit of knowledge about what's going to happen. So we have to gather, as you might imagine, if anyone's been through any type of financial, you've applied for a mortgage, for example, you've got to talk about what your income is, talk about what your expenditure is. We do that, whether it's with companies or individuals. We gather that information in. And then our job is to turn any assets into cash and pay out anybody that's owed money in that scenario in a specific order. And that can also entail some arguments because we deal with everyone that we come across is stressed, whether it's the director of the company or the individual in their own personal finances, or actually whether it's someone that they owe money to, because it has a knock-on impact to the person that's owed money as well. So we get lots of phone calls all the time with stressed people. And what we've got to do is try and balance the stakeholders, we call them, in each insolvency estate. And sometimes the stakeholders like to say, no, I'm definitely due more than that. And those are always interesting conversations to have when you've got to, politely put someone in their place. And I recall once having to do that with a particularly aggrieved creditor who'd lent his neighbour some money and the neighbour went bankrupt. And the creditor was really, really angry. He came on the phone shouting and screaming and saying that I was doing my job wrong. And in those situations, I very calmly but firmly get out my teacher voice and explain what the situation is. And at the end, he said, "Oh my goodness, you must not brush your teeth in the morning. You must sharpen them," because I basically put him in his box. And you know, that's a bit of gallows humour because he's obviously very stressed. But I think whatever process it is, and I won't bore you with the lots of different legislative ways that we can go, you have got to be firm but fair with everybody and stick to the legislation all the time.
And how do you cope then, Claire, with the fact that most people that you are helping and dealing with are stressed, and how, you know, almost that transfer of stress onto you? Are you exhausted at the end of a day after you've spent time with people like that, or do you manage to kind of put some kind of a block up so that it doesn't start affecting you? Because you're a very empathetic person, and you can therefore feel how other people are probably feeling.
I think there are certain situations that really get to you. And I recall years ago when I was and to be fair, I was expecting my son at the time, so I was probably an irrational, hormonal woman. Sorry, pregnant ladies, you actually are fabulous. But I remember being in a creditors meeting, and it was a very sorry set of circumstances. Again, two friends. One friend essentially had taken money off another person who was terminally ill. And it was the widow that I was eventually speaking to some years after the man had passed away. And she was explaining how the money had, you know, been taken from the family. Now her and her family had nothing. She'd retired, but she was having to go back to work, and she was having to work in Marks and Spencer's to cover the Christmas holiday period, that she didn't know what she was going to be getting for her children for Christmas and things like that. And I actually had to say, could you give me a second? I need to go and consult my law books, and got up and left the room and had a good cry to myself. Because one of the things at Middlebrooks that we pride ourselves on is understanding that there's people behind all these numbers. The role that we've got is a really important one, and it is a serious one. And we always try, though, and approach it with the human element of it, and understanding that the vast majority of people that we see, they didn't get up that morning thinking, I know what I'm going to do today. I'm going to make myself bankrupt, or I'm going to rip off that person over there. So we always think about the human element of things, but then that does sometimes lead to it getting a bit too close to you. In the legislation, we've got to be the third party, and technically we're officers of the court, which is very different to what I'm like in reality. And I think what I do, and what my team certainly do, is we equip ourselves. We're always reading about how to have difficult conversations. Within our team, we share a lot of wellness resources as well. We also do have mental health first aiders within our team to look after the team themselves, and we have regular catch-ups just to make sure that we're all okay, because we're human beings, and sometimes we've got, being honest, sometimes we have to evict people from their houses. And that's then when I think we lean into the legislation and we say, that's our third thing. It's not me, Claire, that is evicting someone from the house. It is the trustee in bankruptcy of X person. And one thing that we are really, really focus on at all levels is communication within the team, and communication with the people that we're working with, because 9 times out of 10 we can resolve most things without chucking someone out their house, but only if they talk to us. Am I rambling far too much?
No, spot on. And I guess I'm interested in, what does that look like from a team point of view to support one another, to give yourselves the chance to release or talk about any stresses? What practically do you guys do?
So there's probably quite a lot of gallows humour, I would imagine, and you know, and I'm sure throughout the course of my time we've had lots of funny stories connected to all of that. From a team perspective, we have monthly check-ins with everybody. So we make sure that once a month the team are individually sitting down with someone from the senior management team. We also have team days, which are really great. We learn about each other and about our own characteristics. And as I mentioned earlier, we have our mental health first aider as well. We do Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday. And it's lovely because not just one person does it. We actually have different team members feeding in, which is really great because you get different voices. We do, on the odd occasion, have a nice glass of wine as well to de-stress. But it's a really collegiate team. And yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So at the point then you've got, so you decide, right, I'm going into this insolvency game. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
What happened from there?
So I started off at a really big accountancy firm that is no longer about, actually. It was called Arthur Andersen. They had to disband because they were shredding too many documents in America. I think there might be a musical written about them, actually. I've never seen it. Oh. I don't think it's high on my list of things I want to watch. So I started off there. I had a really varied career there. We used to have what were known as away jobs in those days. So I was just fresh out of university, and those were the days of Ally McBeal, because that is my vintage. So I remember going with my Ally McBeal suit, and I was running a multi-million pound logistics company from Milton Keynes, and I was talking to the finance director. I saw some bad practices then as well. Some of the more senior team members would walk in and say to the director, right, you get out that seat. You're not in charge anymore. I'm in charge. So I resolved as I went through my career that I wasn't going to be that person. And that's where a lot of the numbers behind the stories come from with us. So I started off there. I dotted about a couple of different firms over the next 10 years or so. And then I became a partner in an accountancy firm in Scotland and thought, I really would like to do this differently. And I was fortunate enough to have a lot of family support, and so set up Middlebrooks. I think one of the things about being in insolvency is you have to be flexible. You have to be able to adapt in things. And I was really fortunate when I started Middlebrooks that I've now got the flexibility to adapt. And I do genuinely believe that the way that we approach our insolvency cases, whilst always compliant with the legislation, I'll put that little disclaimer in there, is very different because I'm an owner manager of the business as well. And sitting opposite directors, I'm not going to lie, some of the stories that they tell me are some things that keep me up at night as well, being a business owner. Show me a business owner that's not worried about where the money's coming from. Show me a business owner that's not thought, oh my goodness, it's salary day next week. And then in my own experience, had a wee cry on the kitchen floor. But it's a really lovely career to be in. And I've had flowers sent to me from people that we've helped out before.
And just on that point, do you reckon that helps you, the fact that you're an owner-manager of a boutique IP business, it helps you empathise more with people rather than being an employed IP who's part of a bigger firm? Because they don't have any of those worries that you're just describing that everyone has.
I think it makes Middlebrooks unique. And in fact, I think in the UK, we're in a fairly small group. And certainly, to bang the lady drum, I'm in a very, very small group of female IPs that have set up their own firm and gone through with it. In fact, I once overheard a friend in the legal network. During COVID, we were having a FaceTime call, and I hope she doesn't watch this actually, because she'll be mortified. But she hadn't hung up at the end of our FaceTime call. And I heard her speaking to her husband, and she said, oh, I've just been on the phone to Claire. Remember Claire? I told you she set up her own firm. Everyone thought she was mad for doing it and that she would fail within the first 12 months, but she's doing really well now. and I was like, okay, so I take that as a compliment. But what was even more embarrassing was it wasn't just me on the other end of the call. There was another 2 people, and they were all like, abort, abort.
Well, and okay, off the back of that then, funny story, but how did it make you feel then? What was your reaction to that, to hearing that?
initially I was like, whew, like, stop talking. But then when I reflected on it later, I thought, well, actually, if you're ever going to get a more honest bit of feedback, it's eavesdropping onto somebody else's conversation about you.
Yeah.
And to be fair, it actually was a backhanded compliment because, you know, A, there was people speaking about me when I set up, and B, you know, I've actually socked it to them. And I think at my core, I quite like that. When I first started out, another thing that I like about Middlebrooks, and coming back to the flexibility, is it's absolutely great to have systems, and it's great to have hierarchies, and in certain places they have their place. We are a lot more flexible than that at Middlebrooks, because sometimes you can make a box so small that, you know, you're just in your box. And I've worked at places before, for example, where when I was at one of these away jobs, my role was to maintain the spreadsheet that looked after the key to the toilet. And that was my box, and I wasn't allowed to do anything else. Whereas in Middlebrooks, there's the opportunity to grow. And sometimes if you're too corporate and too boxy, you're not going to give people the opportunity to grow. And in our industry, I think it's really important that you're always taking on information. And we have a saying, every day is a school day. And we say that quite a lot at Middlebrooks, because on a daily basis, you're coming up with things that you've never seen before. You're getting involved in industries that you've never been involved in before. We can, and I appreciate that anyone can work with anyone. And that's absolutely true. There are some industries where you've got a specific set of clients. And insolvency, regretfully, it's like death and taxes, unfortunately. It could happen. Well, death definitely happens to everybody. Taxes happens to some people that sort of avoid it or not. But insolvency could happen to anybody, because there could be a traumatic event in your business life or your personal life. And so we get involved in anything. So I've been involved in mussel farms up in Orkney, for example. So I know how you grow mussels on a rope. I've been involved, as I mentioned earlier, with logistics firms. I've been involved. There was a company that I was involved in that ran naked cruises from a ship. I didn't partake, because that is just horrific. And everything in between. And the thing is, you are always learning, because I don't know how to grow mussels, but I've got to find out, okay, what are those bits of rope worth? How much equipment is needed to put those bits of rope in the water? How many employees have they got? You know, what's their office set up and everything? And although with the work that we do, the core processes are the same, I describe it as like your skeleton. So we've all got the same skeleton there or thereabouts. But what makes us different is like our hair and our facial features and things. So with an insolvency process, we have got statutory things that are like our skeleton that we always have to do. But then you've got the hair and what the clothes of the insolvency estate are like. And that's when you're talking about, so what are we involved in at the moment? Currently, we're involved with a tartan producer. We're involved with a roofing company. We're involved with construction, bars, restaurants, hotels, you name it. We've got that. And that's the bit that gives you the learning, because you're always finding out something new about these things, and it's fascinating.
And so as you've then gone to build a team, you know, what has that process been like for you? I mean, you managed people before, but being a manager and then being an owner with employees, to put it bluntly, you know, how did you find that kind of process?
I would say that has been by far the hardest thing that I have had. When I started Middlebrooks, I thought I knew it all. I was, 34? And I was like, there's not a thing in the world I haven't seen. How wrong could I have been? And actually, that's where I first met Alan. I was introduced to him, and then I phoned Alan and said, oh, can I come and speak to you? And I think I spent most of the time in tears, because I very much started Middlebrooks from the mindset of, why are they just not coming to work? And why are they just not doing what I'm wanting them to do? How difficult is it? And then what I realised, and it's a journey that I'm still on, is that there's a lot of self-discovery that you need to do when you're running a team. I think that I always thought I was quite a self-aware person. Again, completely wrong. And what I've understood is that my biggest asset in Middlebrooks is my team. I really spend the majority of my time now looking after my team, I would say. I've been really fortunate in the last year to 18 months that I've brought people into Middlebrooks that have taken what was already a good foundation, because I've had some wonderful people work with me over the years. But in the last year to 18 months, we've had a lovely groove. We've found our place. I've got the ability to really spend time with them, to really connect with them. It's a funny thing, a little bit like earlier we were talking about, how do you protect yourself from taking home emotional stress from people in financial distress. Over the years, I've had a roller coaster of a relationship with my team. At the start, I would bend over backwards to do anything for them. And it always involved me, more money, salary increases, all of these different things. And then I met Alan and I was like, I don't know what to do. I do everything for them. And so I then started their journey. And what I then did was I pared right back. And I wasn't a friend to them. Insofar as I was never rude, I was never impolite, but I kept up a really, really big barrier for a lot of years. And I would say to them, no, I wouldn't go on like work nights out. I just wouldn't go. Or if I did go, I would go and I would have one glass of wine. And anyone that knows me knows that is weird. And so I built up this wall. And then what I've now been doing for the last couple of years is taking that wall back down again and connecting with them on a much more personal level and finding the right balance for all of that. Because again, regretfully, sometimes all families fall out, and regretfully, sometimes, team members leave. And I even look at myself from when I first started. I remember the first time someone handed in the resignation at Middlebrooks. Oh, I was like the Tasmanian devil. I was running around the office and I was angry and I was shouting and I took it so personally because it felt like such a rejection to me when a team member left. And what I've done through investing in my team, looking at lots of ways that you can make a team function really, really well, is I've taken away that personal nature of it. And I'm looking at it from their perspective and thinking, it's lovely to have someone in your life, but if they want to be out of your life and it's for something that you can't give them, then you need to let them go gracefully.
And tell me this, and maybe the link here being people in your life. Your mum's part of the business.
She is.
So, and you'd mentioned that you might be mentioning her in this little chat of ours. So how is that working with your mum?
Oh, my mother is genuinely, she's just this force of nature, my mum, and she's got this really, really annoying habit of being right most of the time. And I'll go back to the cowboy boots. The reason that she wouldn't let me get the cowboy boots is they were suede. And she said, Claire, if you go out in the rain, they'll get ruined. Of course, I've got suede boots on today. I feel like a total rebel. I hope it's not going to rain because they will get ruined. My mum's right. My mum's comes from a banking background and she has come into the business and she looks after the money and everybody is mildly petrified of Margaret. But if ever you wanted someone to look after your money, she's the lady. And the biggest bit of business related advice that she ever gave me, and I'll say it to everyone, is don't eat the elephant. Because it's so easy to get overwhelmed when you're running a business or involved in any big project and you have this elephant in the room and you can't possibly eat that in one. You've got to try and chop it up. Yeah. And my mum says that to me all the time. She knows when I'm starting to get stressed because I get hyper and I'm always having to do something. And she'll always say, now remember, don't eat the elephant. And she is now talking back to looking after the team, I think she's probably team mum to everybody now. So she comes up. We recently had a team day. She came along. She wasn't that fussed about coming, but she had a good day at the end of it. She gave the presenter some really good feedback. So no, it's great. And I guess, who can you trust more than your mum? No one.
Tell me this, and you mentioned obviously it's your mum, but she's called Margaret. How do you refer to her whilst in a business setting?
Oh, so
is it Mum or Margaret?
It's actually FD. So my mum is a company's house director of Middlebrooks, and she is a financial director. So I refer to her as FD, and so does everybody else. Or else. Yeah, if FD sends you a Teams message or phones you, you answer. Yeah. I was in a meeting the other day with my colleague Katie, and she actually said, no, I would always answer the phone to you, Margaret. You know, other people, I might just let it ring, but you, I answered the phone.
I like that.
Formidable.
Yeah.
So you've been on quite a transition over the last few years from being, you know, maybe the face and always the person that picks up the phone to trying to get into a position more of a, I guess, a business owner and less on the front lines. Why?
So when I first set up Middlebrooks, I wanted to call it CM squared, because my name's Claire, my daughter's Madison, and my son is Marshall. So that's where the M squared would have come from. My husband was annoyed because he said, well, where am I, Clive, involved in this? It's my name that, you know. And I went and I sat down at my friend's house and I said, I'm going to set up a business. I'm going to call it CM squared. And my friend's husband said, why would you not use your name? It's such a really nice name. So that's where my husband Clive is coming, because Middlebrook is my married name. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I was speaking to another insolvency practitioner who works at a different firm. I've known him for years. He used to be a manager in a team that I worked in. And I said, I'm having such a great time at Middlebrooks. I said, but, you know, everyone keeps talking to me about a business exit and what you're going to do. And he turned around and he said to me, well, at the end of the day, Claire, you're never going to exit it because it's your name. And without Middlebrooks, there is nothing. And I thought, what? And I always want to prove people wrong. So that's actually genuinely that comment, that off the cuff comment that he probably will not even remember saying, sparked me thinking, I need to make this less about me. And again, anyone who knows me, I possibly do make things about me quite a bit. You know, I've called my company Middlebrooks. But I recognised that I couldn't keep working the amount of hours that I was working, but also I wanted to build a something. And to be fair, his comments were on the nose because I didn't really have a business. It was really, you know, what's the Little Britain sketch with Dennis Waterman? I wrote the theme tune, I sang the theme tune, you know. I was doing everything and it was all about me. So I wanted to really build something. And I think why we're in the place that we are now, and I'm always going to be touching wood because nothing's ever certain in this life, is because we've taken the branding, but we've made it a thing rather than a person. So I actually now, you know, for a lot of years, Middlebrooks was like my right hand. You know, it was an extension of my person. And now see it as it's having its own life form now. And it's got its, you know, own way of doing things. And actually, sometimes its own way of doing things, I think, I don't really like that very much. But I sometimes just let it do things that I don't really want it to do because I need it to be disruptive. I need it to change and evolve if it needs to. And one of the great things that we've done is the digital stuff. You know, we've got a fabulous videography team, if that's the right word. I'm not very good at saying that. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Yeah, people come and they stick a camera in our face and they listen to us. And what we've done is we've actually pioneered that in the Edinburgh space because people like us weren't doing that. Yeah. And the amount of times now that me and my team are at events and it's, oh, we saw your video the other week, it was really good. Or, oh, that was it, where did you shoot that video? And people are talking about it. And it's great also that when you're the boss and you tell the team to do something and they actually do it, because they hate getting filmed, but they come along and they do it, and it's brilliant. It's made it a thing.
Yeah. And so is that part then of the succession plan? Is it to get out the business? Is it to sell the business? What is ultimately, do you know where you want to take it?
So I think step one is my personality is, again, I'm not very detail focused, which for the work that I do is really it really is a conflict. So my first step was to get in other licensed insolvency practitioners so I could do the bit that I enjoy, which is talking to people, as you might have guessed, and listening to people. And then someone else can worry about the statutory stuff over here. So that's kind of like step one. I guess step two, I would absolutely love to retire and be a Disney princess, or probably more because of my age, I fit the Disney villain mode. I'm currently investigating an Ursula costume for Halloween. I think I'll look perfect with this hair. And I would love to be in a position where I could work with other business owners and, chat them through some of, the pitfalls to avoid without actually having the statutory stuff. There is one of the things, and it's good that we are a learning and developing team, because insolvency legislation changes yearly. It's like a moving feast. There is a lot of regulation that goes on in behind it. There are a lot of regulatory visits, and I'll be honest, those are the things that I find quite stressful as well, because my nature, someone coming in and marking your homework, it is a horrible experience. And even that process, it's an exception report, so they're never going to pat you on the back and say, well done. I've always enjoyed hanging out with you guys and other business owners because, you talk about the positive side of things, and you say, okay, we've made a mistake, let's learn from it. They come in and just batter you over the head with a big book called Buttersworth's that's about that big, and they've said, you've done this wrong, you've done that wrong, you've done the other thing wrong. There's never, well done, yeah, actually this one over here is perfect. That is the bit about what we do and it's there for good and valid reasons, but I cannot stand it. It's so diametrically opposed to everything that's going on in the world right now. In the world right now, it's about acceptance, it's about inclusivity, it's about, being supportive, it's about having people's backs, and regulation is there just to hit you around the head.
So what would you say to folks who are maybe in a position where they are nervous or worried about where their business is at? I just think it's quite interesting because it's like, not sure we've said it yet, but people don't want to, well, you said it at the beginning, people don't want to talk to you. And then the sign of coming to talk to you is almost the acceptance of there's a major thing wrong. So, what is your advice to those who are maybe in a position where they're like, I'm not sure if this is going in the direct, what would you say to them?
I would say pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. Doesn't need to be to Middlebrooks. I genuinely, it doesn't even need to be to Middlebrooks, but pick up the phone to somebody that is a licensed insolvency practitioner. Don't chat to your mate down the pub. Well, chat to your mate down the pub about it if you want a shoulder to cry on, but, speak to somebody that actually knows what the scenario is. I have daily conversations with directors who the biggest thing is plucking up the courage to speak to me. And the feedback that I get and the feedback that my team gets is, A, I feel so much better, and B, you're actually quite nice. A lot of people think, I joked about maybe bringing a scythe as a prop with me today, but a lot of people think that I'm wearing black, I should have worn something colourful. Sorry. A lot of people think that what you're going to get when you speak to a licensed insolvency practitioner is finger wagging and something akin to debtor's prison from Poldark. It isn't like that. When you sit down with an insolvency practitioner, if you're a director in a limited company, their role initially is to advise the board, is to listen and say, well, I think you've got A, B, C option. Similarly, if you're a person that's going through financial distress, a licensed insolvency practitioner is to say, right, option 1 is you do nothing. Option 2 is you've got full-scale bankruptcy. Option C might be not quite as bad as bankruptcy, but something known as a trust deed, and all of the ranges in between. They're not there to judge you. And in fact, we have our external values, but we're not there to judge. That, glass houses and throwing stones and all that, that is not what we're there to do. We're there to demystify what might seem really, really scary. I can't take away from the fact that there is a bit of pain involved in what we do, but I think I would rather know what I'm facing. I once was asked if I could liken the job I do to another, maybe better known profession. And I said, I probably would liken us to a GP. It's because you go and see, sometimes you got to pluck up the courage to go and see your GP. Mm-hmm. A GP knows lots about everything and also sometimes needs to give you bad news, but can point you in the direction of maybe a specialist that you might need, or can say, right, this is what we're going to do, and can start you on treatment. And that's what we do for companies and people's finances.
Do you know, Claire, you're just making me think of a kind of a principle that you know very well, which is above and below the line. Yeah. And what you're describing there to me, that using the GP analogy is denial. Mm-hmm. You know, people who go into denial, the times when doctors say, if only you'd come 6 months ago, we might have been able to do something. You've left it too late. And it's a bit like that with businesses coming to you, which is, because it's the burying the head in the sand, hoping the problem goes away. Mm-hmm. It doesn't. And, but if they had plucked up the courage or just got over themselves to come and see you, then you could probably find a way through the problem, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So it occurred to me as you were saying it.
Yay, I've made you think.
I've been thinking the whole way through. I've been thinking you're great, Claire. And I think as well, as you said, the finger pointy kind of image of the traditional IP. It's like, everything that you're doing on, with the videos, you and the team, you're almost making it much more accessible for people to come in what are hard times, difficult to do that. And I think, the way you're going about your business in this industry is phenomenal.
Thank you.
I love it.
We ask all our guests, what is your guiding principle in business?
My guiding principle is probably listen to my mum.
Listen to Margaret.
Listen to FD. No, my guiding principle is, I think, never get too big for your boots either. I think I've seen a lot of people that, they do really, really well, and then the old adage, pride comes before a fall. I also, am I allowed more than one?
Yeah, keep going.
I also think that being fair is really, really important. Making sure that you are, giving everyone a level playing field is really important, especially when it comes to your team. I must confess that HR policies turned me off hugely. I now love them. They're something that I cling to, and they're really, really important. They weren't very good ones, were they?
They were very good. You also had mentioned in some previous conversations, there was another one that it was a phrase that you kind of quoted from somewhere, which you
what said, was it again?
Act.
Oh no, it was act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. And a very dear friend of mine who sat over the table once gave me a lovely little Coach Wooden playbook. One of the things that I do. You gave me his playbook, and it also had some scripture in it as well. Outside of work, I love being involved in my local church. It's loads of fun. It's sometimes a little bit like the Vicar of Dibley, and I think that's why I like it. Especially love a Kirk session meeting. Lots of fun. But I take a lot of direction from that area of my life as well. And that Coach Wooden playbook is a really, really good one for me, because sometimes with the work that I do, everyone ponders what they why am I here? And sometimes with the work that I do, I'm like, oh, is this really in line with my own personal values? And it's helpful when you have things that remind you that, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis at work doesn't really define who you are as a person as well. So I like all of that stuff.
Brilliant. Claire, thank you so much for coming on and sharing a little bit of your story, and good luck in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Claire.